Welcome to the Investing Podcast presented by Tusk Media. The final bell has rung and the market is now closed. So let's move on to an audio and video recap with the Investing Happy Hour.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Investing Podcast. This is Investing Happy Hour presented by Tusk Media. Today is Wednesday, June 1st, 2016. This is my Michael Jordan flu game. I'm not sick, I'm not under the weather, but I am performing under some pretty adverse weather. So if you hear some thunder, some lightning, some rain, just know that all it's doing is feeding my adrenaline even more. Super excited for this episode of the Investing Happy Hour. We're going to really bring it to you. We're going to talk at first about the market today. We had really small gains. We're talking about a few basis point movements for the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow. So they eked out narrow gains. Futures were down this morning. We talked about that, but we're happy to see a little bit of progress for the market. Again, we made some predictions this morning. If you want to check out the morning market mimosa, you can kind of see what I called for the month of June. But thus far, we are on track. We're seeing some progress in the equity market. That is certainly good news, especially with some big headlines looming. Tomorrow, OPEC is meeting. Now, if you're wondering what OPEC is, maybe you hear that in the news, maybe you know a lot about it. It's an organization of oil-producing companies. The best way to remember it is oil price extra crappy. That tends to be what OPEC wants to do. So 13 oil-producing nations, they get together and they don't necessarily set a price, but they do decide how much they want to produce. And that's the big headline tomorrow, is what will they do with production. If you know anything about supply and demand, Econ 101, you know that a supply glut can create problems and can create stress for the price of oil. Now, oil barely moved today ahead of this meeting. That's a barrel joke. Bear with me. But oil barely moved today in advance of that, which is kind of interesting. But I actually read an article that says typically when OPEC meetings are occurring, the average movement of oil is actually just north of around 1% during those meeting days, which is not that outside of the ordinary for oil on a standalone basis. So there is going to probably be some market reaction, particularly some reaction within the energy sector, obviously with these oil companies that we've been talking so much about, not just on these podcasts, but really over the last 18 months. The expectation is that OPEC is going to keep production high. And again, the idea here is that if there's an oversupply of oil, that's going to put pressure on some American companies. And that's going to mean that some of these companies may not make it because they're going to have to reduce what they're actually producing. Because again, there's more oil coming from overseas. The problem with that is that also creates a lot of strain for some other smaller oil producing nations. But the expectation, again, is that production is going to remain high. I do think by the end of the year, maybe at the December meeting, we might see some rebalancing, maybe some changes in the supply that OPEC's willing to put out there in the oil market. But for now, we're not expecting much change. I think that's priced into the market for the most part. We've been looking at oil hovering around the $50 a barrel mark. I would be surprised if it moves more than a little bit away from that tomorrow. I think anything in the $48, $49 range is probably what you can kind of expect. Speaking of oil-producing nations and OPEC, Saudi Arabia's National Investment Fund just made a $3.5 billion, that's with a B, dollar investment in Uber. I don't know anything about Uber Saudi Arabia. I know a lot about Uber here in some of my favorite cities. $3.5 billion is so many rides home. That's going to be really interesting to see what that turns out to be. Uber obviously has made a lot of movements in terms of partnerships and offering fleet cars, things like that. I do think that's a company to keep an eye on. They've raised a ton of private equity. I do think at some point they will IPO, they will be able to offer some stock to you. But it's going to be interesting because that valuation just keeps going higher and higher and higher. Speaking of valuations going higher and higher and higher, the big winner for today was Michael Kors. This is the third time we've mentioned that stock today because they had strong earnings and a share buyback program that was announced. So we talked about them in pre-market. We talked about them during the stock market power lunch. We're talking about them again. They closed the day up 6.6%. Really strong day. Indo Pharmaceuticals also had a strong day, up more than 5%. Other companies that we saw that we monitored throughout the day, Under Armour closed down about 3.9%. Obviously not a great day for the athletic apparel company, but that's much better than they were at the midpoint of the day. They were down close to 5.5% at one point. So they rallied a little bit despite a revised lower outlook for revenue and sales. Other losers for the day, Freeport Freeport McMoran continued to struggle. They were down more than 4%. They're going to continue to struggle when oil dominates the headline. Until oil is really showing growth on its price per barrel basis, I think that company will continue to struggle. This has been the Investing Happy Hour. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, wherever you're listening, make sure you're subscribing. Download, delete, re-download. Helps us get more listens. We will be back tomorrow with a morning market mimosa.
Tusk Media is a subsidiary of Narwhal Capital Management. Ratings and reviews of Tusk Media content are not to be construed as endorsements of opinions, analysis, or services offered by Tusk or its parent company. The opinions and predictions shared here are professional beliefs at the time of publication. We are not under duress from any of the corporate entities mentioned. This is not a solicitation to take any particular action. Although we are investment advisors, this information should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice. We strive to be as impartial, insightful, and accurate as possible. We base our opinions, analysis, and calculations on information we believe to be reliable, but we cannot guarantee its accuracy. We can, however, guarantee that our opinions will sometimes be flat out wrong due to a variety of factors. Employees and clients of Narwhal Capital Management may or may not hold positions in the securities detailed and may or may not hold these positions in the future. A full list of all securities purchased, sold, or held during the 12 months preceding the date of this publication can be provided upon request. Unless otherwise noted, all data accessed via MarketWatch or the Bloomberg terminal. Past performance does not guarantee future results. A copy of Narwhal's Form ADV is available at the SEC's website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov, or from Narwhal upon written request.